Victorians have certainly been backing the approach Daniel Andrews has been taking in terms of looking at the polls. So close now to when further easing would happen. Is it worth just backing this approach until October 19 or whatever it might be?
Well, Tom, you ask a great question. At what cost, though, in backing this draconian approach to dealing with the pandemic? The reality is, yes, we are having a significant drop in cases, which is fantastic. But if you look at New South Wales as a comparison, at the same time that they had similar case numbers to what we're experiencing, their economy was open. People were back at work. Kids were at school, families were able to bury loved ones, people were able to get married. So what we're seeing is a completely draconian approach to handling this pandemic. And whilst I welcome, obviously, the curfew being lifted in particular for Melburnians, and to see, over 120,000 people getting back into, particularly the manufacturing industry, able to get to work, it shouldn't have taken this long. And it should never have happened in the first place. So I think it's important, as we make our way out of the pandemic and open up our economy in Victoria, that we don't forget how we got here, because economists are already saying this will take a generation to get over. And given the significance of the Victorian economy to the national piece, it's going to have ramifications right throughout the country.
Just on a comparison on pure daily numbers compared with New South Wales, do you accept the health advice that it's different? First of all, you've got the 14-day average is still above 20, but also so many cases, so many active cases have been through Victoria, a peak of 725 in a day. There's more possibility of latent virus out there in the community. So, comparing, we've got 5 a day now in Victoria. You can't compare that to 5 a day in New South Wales not so long ago.
Well, I think you have to look at the testing rates as well, Tom. I mean, for me, out in regional Victoria, we're still having to wear masks around, despite there being no active COVID cases, in many instances in excess of 7 months. So to sort of be pulling out medical advice now as a justification when we've got so many examples over time of this government making decisions and impacting our economy and people's daily life, in how they've dealt with the pandemic, not being reliant on medical advice, it begs the question what leadership is about. And I think in a global pandemic such as we're going through at the moment, state leaders, state premiers and leaders in general should be not governing from principles of fear, but actually providing confidence to the community that they've got the competence to deal with this appropriately and to enact policies that are based on science and not on political outcomes.
So as to what's happened, of course, there was a hotel quarantine and this inquiry that wrapped up on Friday in terms of new evidence or people giving evidence, so we'll have a result on that soon. The Health Minister resigned. Is this the end of sort of taking the ultimate responsibility as you see it from the response?
Well, I think it's appropriate that former Minister Mikakos resigned. You've seen today in the newspapers the shockwaves that's sending through the state Labor caucus as they're looking around at who's next. The way that the Premier handled this was quite incredible. Anyone that's been following the inquiry, it was sort of like that scene out of Get Smart, where nobody knows anything. You've got ministers that should have known what was going on. You then have the media doing a fantastic job across the board on actually pulling out pieces of footage that show them actually contradicting their evidence to the inquiry. So I think there should be more accountability through the outcomes of the inquiry, and I hope that ministers and public servants who have played a role in the disastrous impact of the implementation of the quarantine and contact tracing actually examine that and make the appropriate decisions
just on
around
that
their
then,
responsibility.
when you say public servants, so the clear evidence at the inquiry shows it was the preference of Victoria Police via the Commissioner to have private security as the front line, police only as backup as required. Do questions need to be asked as to why of the Police Commissioner?
Absolutely. Like, at the end of the day, Australians, and in this case Victorians, elect a government to make the tough decisions, to get advice from the public service, and that includes police commissioners. But at the end of the day, it is the minister's ultimate responsibility of how that is implemented. So you can get that advice from the police commissioner. What you choose to do with it as a minister is your decision. And I think absolutely
that was
we
the
should be asking questions. We should be asking questions of the police commissioner.
You'd expect the minister should have pushed back on that.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's fair enough for questions to be asked. Sorry, Tom,
Okay.
we're doing that. I think it is appropriate for the minister to have questioned the advice that came up, particularly in the face of repeated offers for ADF personnel to assist with both the quarantine and the contact tracing over time.
Just dealing with a slight delay there, didn't mean to keep interrupting you. Just wanted to ask you finally about manufacturing as well. The Prime Minister with another announcement in the lead up to the budget. You were quoted today as saying it shrunk too much over the past 30 years. A lot of that on the Coalition's watch in a federal sense. Well, why has this happened?
Well, you know, it's devastating. I want to see Australia make again and to see advanced manufacturing grow. We've seen it shrink over the last 5 decades to a fifth of its size in the 60s, and Harvard has released a report recently looking at the complexity of national economies, knowing the more complex and diverse your national economy is, the more resilient it's going to be to shocks. And we've fallen from 57th to 93rd over sort of 25-year period. So our manufacturing's just decreased from 30% of our GDP to 6%. So I'm really buoyed by the Prime Minister's announcement that we're going to once again start encouraging advanced manufacturing. What I want to see is more of that out in the regions. Over 30% of our manufacturing already is in regional communities. We've got great food, fibre and mineral primary products. It'd be great to add value in our local communities. So I'm excited about the employment opportunities that'll provide, but also that the underpinning economic growth piece, but also the role of advanced manufacturing in our national security conversation, because what COVID has done is really exposed weaknesses in our supply chains. Even if you look at something simple like ag-vet chemicals that our primary producers use to grow our food and our export ag task, you know, we're heavily reliant on overseas supply chains for that very critical input on farms. So being able to manufacture that here at home, local jobs, plus economic security going forward for our farmers.
Bridget McKenzie, thanks for your time. Talk soon.
Anytime, Tom.